Hi everybody, it's Drew. We really miss seeing you guys in the museum. I really miss working at the front desk and getting to greet all you guys. So I wanted to share this story with you. Today I'm going to read The Crayon Man. You guys ready? Once there was a man who saw color everywhere. He noticed the yellow-orange petals of the black-eyed Susans in his garden. He marveled at the rich scarlet-red tones of the cardinal's feathers. He admired the deep blue greens of the waves in the sea. Color made him really, really happy. But all day long at work, all he saw was black. Black dust, black tar, black smoke, black ink, black dye, black shoe polish. His company sold carbon, black, a new kind of pigment or colored substance made from the soot of burning oil and natural gas. People used it in printing inks, electric, street lamps, and stove and shoe polish. It also made rubber car tires last much longer. His name was Edmund Binney, and he was an inventor. He worked with his cousin C. Harold Smith. Together they were Binney and Smith. Harold was a great salesman. He loved to travel the world. Edwin was curious. He had a knack for listening and making what people needed. Edwin invented a new kind of inexpensive slate pencil that wrote very smoothly. It was gray. Children loved it. He invented a kind of chalk that wasn't dusty and didn't crumble. It was white. Teachers loved it. He invented a wax crayon that would write on wood and paper packaging. It was really, really black. People loved it. So when everyone, including Edwin's wife Alice, told him that children needed better, cheaper crayons, he listened. They said, "The crayons we have are big, dull, and clumsy. The lumps of colored clay only make fat, chunky lines, and the artists' crayons from Europe are far too expensive. They crumble and break easily. Some are even poisonous." Alice used to be a school teacher, so she knew what children needed. She encouraged Edwin to invent the crayons. Edwin thought about his company's inventions. When you drew a picture with their gray slate pencil, it rubbed off at the drop of a hat. When you drew a picture with their white chalk, it smudged everywhere. If you drew a picture with Edwin's new Willy Black crayon, it was really black. None of these inventions was any good for drawing in color. So Edwin listened and Edwin invented. In a small stone mill in Pennsylvania, in a top secret lab, Edwin's team experimented. How could they make better, stronger crayons? Melted paraffin wax, perhaps? The first colored crayons invented in Europe were made from a mixture of charcoal and oil, so they broke easily. To make stronger crayons, Edwin tried using wax instead. Now for the crayon colors. Grinding up rocks and minerals into fine powders. Mixing slate for gray, earth for yellow, red and brown perhaps. Oh yes, and lapis for blue. pounding, sifting, and heating the colors, powders. Would they be bright enough? Edwin's team kept on trying, they kept on experimenting. Ground up rocks and minerals made bright pigments for crayons, red non-oxide, hematite for red, yellow iron oxide, goethite for yellow, varied shades of red, iron oxide for brown, carbon black for black, zinc oxide for white, and imported ultramarine made for lapis lazuli for blue. They came home covered in color. They experimented some more and discovered a pinch of this pigment, a sploosh of that one, a little hotter, a little cooler, and Olea, lots of different shades. Now there were greens, oranges, violets, and pinks too. Edwin came home and covered in color. To make orange, green, and violet, chemists blended various pigments and clays. Some minerals changed colors when heated, plus the length of time the mixtures were left to cool created different colors too. In a large tub at the mill, Edwin's team measured out the ingredients. Melted wax, clay to thicken, something for texture, colored powders, each in just the right amount every time to make a top secret formula. Slowly, carefully stirring by hand, they poured the special formula into thin crayon-shaped molds, smaller than any other inventor's, just the right size for children's hands. The mixtures cooled and hardened. Edwin watched and Edwin waited. Children might eat or chew the crayons and get sick, so Edwin's team experimented to find new safe, non-toxic colors and minerals. Look how colorful they are. Aren't those colors so cool? Finally, one summer evening in June 1903, Edwin came home covered in color and announced that he'd invented a new kind of colored crayon. But what should he call it? His wife Alice had an idea. She said, let's mix the French word cray for the stick of chalk and the word ola from the word oleaginous, meaning oily, like the oily texture of the crayon wax, to invent a new word. Crayola. Edwin listened. Binney and Smith shipped out the first Crayola crayon boxes: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, brown, and black. 8 colored crayons for only a nickel. Edwin waited. Would children like them? Children did. Now they could draw a tiny green caterpillar or the big blue sky. Their drawings wouldn't smudge and they wouldn't rub out. They were bright and could last a long, long time. In the 1900s, inventors had figured out how to make paper from wood pulp, so children could now draw on paper instead of just slate. Excitement over the new colorful invention spread like wildfire. Admirers from far and wide flocked to marvel at Binney and Smith's inventions at the St. Louis World's Fair. The company's dustless chalk even won a gold medal. Proudly, Edwin and Harold showed it off, especially on their new Crayola crayon boxes. Every day, Edwin brought colorful bouquets from his garden to inspire the Crayola team. They made crayons in even more different shades and later asked children to help name some of them. To celebrate their 19th anniversary, Crayola held a color naming competition. The 6-year-old winner coined Tropical Rainforest. Other colors names created by children included Robin's Egg Blue, Trickle Me Pink, and Macaroni and Cheese. At last, because of Edwin and Benny, the man who saw color everywhere, who had a knack for listening and making what people needed, children all around the world could reach for just the right shade. Sunglow, Wisteria, Jungle Green, Screamin' Green, Razzmatazz, Robin's Egg Blue, Wild Watermelon, Marvelous, Purple Mountain's Majesty, Cadet Blue, Lavender, Timberwolf, to draw anything. Aren't those such cool names? I really like those names. How Crayola crayons are made today. In 1903, Crayola crayons were made carefully in small lots, labeled and packaged in boxes by hand, and sold to schools. Today, machines produce an average of 12 million crayons a day. That's over 8,333 crayons a minute. In more than 120 different colors. They are sold in 80 countries around the world. Wow, that's really cool. Train cars deliver paraffin wax to the Crayola factory in eastern Pennsylvania. The wax is heated, and the color in the clear melted liquid is stored in tall silos ready to be pumped inside. Workers pour powdered called pigments into vats filled with the liquid wax, add clay to thicken it, then mix. The wax pigment mixture is pumped into a large mold. It looks like a giant circular muffin tin. The mix fills all the 10 small crayon-shaped holes into each section. Cold water flows underneath the mold to cool the wax and harden it into crayon shapes. A large blade scrapes off extra wax to be reused later. The crayons are pushed up from the mold. A robotic arm then moves them to the labeling machine. Workers check the finished crayons, store them in large cardboard cartons, one for each color. To make up Crayola boxes, workers place the crayons in the right order in the collating machine. A chute drops one of each color kneaded onto a conveyor belt. A robotic arm opens the flat-packed green and yellow Crayola boxes and sends them out onto the conveyor belt. Another arm pushes the collated crayons into each box and closes it. The boxes move down the conveyor belt to be packed into larger cartons. Crayola ships the finished crayons to the store, and they are sold to you. A man who loved color. Edwin Binney was born in 1866. As a child, he loved swimming, hunting, fishing, and sailing. When he grew up and had to work in an office in the city, Edwin decided to build a house on some farmland by the sea in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. He planted a colorful vegetable and flower garden. Most mornings he walked to the station with his daughters, listening for birdsong. He wanted them to share his love for color and nature too. My great-grandfather Edwin Binney was a gentle, kind, and generous man, a passionate lover of nature. Grandpa Bub rarely chose to be indoors, preferring the woods, the wind, the seas, and of course, his much-beloved Crayola flower garden, from which he cut and carried bouquets of colors to his office each day. Sally Putnam Chapman, Edwin's great-granddaughter, said. Funny and brightened, Edwin kept on listening and creating all his life, but Of all his inventions, he loved the Crayon crayons most of all. His partner C. Harold Smith was the outgoing salesman, while Edwin worked at the factory with chemists and designers to create their products. The successful crayon business meant that Edwin and Harold could give back to the community. Edwin created a big park with flowers, trees, a pond, and playing fields in the old Greenwich. And when times were tough during the Great Depression, Crayon factory workers kept their jobs and local farmers got work labeling and packaging crayons. After Edwin died in 1934, Crayon continued his mission to create innovative products that bring the wonder of color to people of all ages. On top, that's a picture of Edwin, and down on the bottom, that's a picture of Edwin's wife Alice with his 2 grandchildren. Primary sources: